For a closer look at the motives behind attacks and why so many go unpunished, I spoke to Jaf Shah. He is the executive director of Acid Survivors Trust International in London.
Many countries in South Asia have high levels of poverty. There's a weak, ineffective and corrupt policing and judiciary system, a poor respect of human rights, and very high levels of gender inequality, which leads to discriminatory practices. I think these are the common factors with many of those countries in South Asia. As to why perpetrators of attacks aren't actually being imprisoned, the sad reality is that the policing and the judiciary are generally quite inefficient, ineffective and corrupt, and that's pretty much common across the region. Very few cases actually reach prosecution.
How are the assailants getting their hands on acid, and why is this the weapon of choice, especially on the face?
Well, firstly, concentrated, 96% concentrated sulfuric acid is pretty much freely available in most of those countries. Quite a few of them have actually introduced implementation of law to control the sale of acid, but that's been ineffective. You can still purchase concentrated acid for very little cost. And it's become a weapon of choice because perpetrators wish to maim and disfigure their victims. It's not about killing, it's really about disfiguring them to the point where they feel that want to shame that individual, that victim, and for them to go into hiding.
In the Indian city of Mumbai, a man was sentenced to death for a fatal acid attack on a woman. Could that type of punishment, a death penalty, deter attacks?
I don't think there's actually any evidence that capital punishment, the death penalty, actually acts as a real deterrent. I think to address the problem, you really need to address the underlying causes of acid violence, which is gender inequality, discrimination. You have to change the attitudes and the behavior of men who treat women in such bad way. We need to educate rather than seek to institutionalize violence through state-sanctioned killing.
What kind of support will victims need, and what is the impact on their loved ones? You talk about disfigurement, shame. How can organizations like yours help?
Well, the problem is for many survivors, they're dealing with multiple issues whilst dealing with a very, very traumatic attack, which means that they're undergoing medical treatment, they're receiving multiple surgical procedures, they're probably suffering some form of disability, and on top of that, many survivors will be suffering depression, and in some cases, some survivors will be suicidal. So that requires a holistic response. That means social services, the police, the medical practitioners, the rehabilitation specialists, the counsellors, the psychologists, all have to work in unison to bring about effective change for these survivors.